In a world of endless possibilities, there are some things that remain unchanged. My inability to solder, for example. I've always been enamored by the idea of creating this epic dragon doll, and yet, every time I attempt to bring this vision to life, I am met with disappointment and a pile of melted plastic. But we're nothing if not persistent, and we've finally done it. Behold, the dragon art doll crafted with love and a lot of glue. My name is Barb, and this is Alex, and welcome to Enchanterium 2023 edition.
We actually did a dragon doll before, so I don't know why being so serious about it. You may remember Dragetarr, a dragon BJD that Dragetarr sent us last summer. We customized it into a Axolotl-inspired wire dragon named Churro. This time we're going to customize a different type of Dragetarr's doll, Salvador. We'll leave a link to the Dragetarr website in the description so you can check their work and know more about their unique dragon dolls. Let's get to work. I know it's all white on white, but I hope you can see something. I'm starting by separating the parts, but trying to save the original order of the pieces of his neck and tail. I don't want to play puzzles later.
Welcome back to our Enchant Kitchen Blue Dye Edition. We are going to boil some stinky chemicals to make the dragon a different color all throughout so that the joints don't chip when we move the dragon. As if we're gonna move it, it's so stuck. After doing a test on one extra ball, we decided that a minute in the mixture will give us the color we want, so we dipped all of the parts, but not all at the same time because our dye pot is small, in the dye for a minute. I made sure to stir and actually submerge all of the pieces for an even coverage. This is what we thought it would look like, but with it still being wet, the color turned out even lighter. I give everything a proper wash to make sure these don't stain anything, and this time I was smart and saved the dye in a jar. But to be frank, I left it too cool and I have no idea where it is now.
Our mom says it's on the blood.
Blood. You can maybe hopefully see that we attempted to do a gradient on the legs with the dye to make the tips darker. At this point, I told Alex to play Surgeon Simulator and she cut the dragon in half instead. This made me want to destroy the dragon too, but before that, a few words from today's sponsor, Skillshare. You guys know the drill. New year, new me. If you're looking for a realistic challenge in this new year, how about a Skillshare class to guide you along? My personal recommendation for kickstarting 2023 would be the class titled The Perfect 100-Day Project, your guide to explosive creative growth, in which Rich Armstrong sets you off on a 100-day long journey of improving your skills consistently every day. If you're not ready for that long of a commitment, Skillshare has classes in many other areas, which don't require 100 days to complete. And I'm certain the topic you're looking for is covered in one of the 1,000 classes they have to offer. The first 1,000 of our viewers who join through our link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare so you can achieve your new goals this year. Now back to manically destroying the dragon. I had to widen the holes in the neck and tail pieces for what's to come, but they were so small that I had Alex hold them with pliers. They did spin out of control a bunch anyway, and some of them got torn up like the ones in the back here, but we're not gonna let that stop us. Time for the main event, the LEDs. At first, just the wings were supposed to light up, and I wanted to do edge-lit acrylic for this on our Lassier machine. But then Alex was like, how about we, and by we I mean you, put them in the neck and make light up spikes. And I was like, bruh, I don't think that's gonna work. And she was like, make it work, and now we're here. So I started by making a case for some small batteries that will fit into the dragon's belly. We need 4 batteries to have enough voltage to put 2 LEDs in series and put those series in parallel. That way we need less resistors. Also, obligatory, this is not an electronics tutorial. I suck at this, and I'm not saying this because I want you to say, no Barb, you're so good at electronics. I legitimately am so stupid about this in about 5 minutes, so yeah, don't do what I do. I tested the circuit on my breadboard to make sure the resistance is fine, because last time I was doing electronics, I bought resistors that were 1,000 times too big, and I couldn't figure out why it didn't work, which I told you, stupid. Since the circuit worked, I went on to make it permanent and threw the dragon's neck and tail. I did upgrade my gear, so the process is a bit less awful now, but it's still not my favorite thing to do, especially because fitting all of this in tiny dolls is very hard usually. I made sure to insulate everything I could with shrink tubes to avoid short circuits, and I shoved the LEDs into the tiny holes as gently as I could to avoid breaking everything and shorting the circuits, breaking off the connections, foreshadowing. I made sure to test the circuits every 2 lights I put in, and it seemed like everything was working perfectly fine, but you know what the word seems implies. After stringing on all the pieces, i.e. shoving elastic through the pieces with the very fragile wiring, this was supposed to be an anti-fragile joke, but I'm not feeling it anymore. 2 of the LEDs were dead.
And it's actually the easiest one to check. Yeah, there again. Shit. Okay, well, maybe we have a little bit more problems than I anticipated.
I had to disassemble some of the dragon to find out what's up. Thankfully, it was the first LED, so I didn't have to disassemble the whole thing. This is not the final step, nor is it the last problem with the wiring, but now let's prep some polymer clay. We are blitzing some translucent blue and translucent no color with a bit of baby oil to make it more workable. When it started to crumble into bigger chunks, I put it all together and ran it through my pasta machine to get it smooth and thin for Alex to take over. But before I do let her take over, a quick shout out to our Super Thanks supporters from our last video. You guys rock!
When the dragon has his tail and neck wired and stringed, I can start decorating the pieces. I'm using blue translucent polymer clay that has to be baked in the oven to cure, so I can't sculpt directly on the doll because I can't put the LEDs and wires into high temperatures. So I made a barrier from aluminum foil and sculpted these icicles that hopefully will glow with LEDs inside. Because I had to cure them separately, the transition is not perfect, and I'm adding spikes using epoxy sculpt. This type of clay cures by mixing 2 parts, and no oven is needed, so it's perfect for this type of doll. I made it look like rocks or crystals, with hard edges and geometrical shapes. I also added small ones for a more cohesive look. To be honest, I have a slightly different color in mind for this dragon. I'm going to paint all the pieces with blue acrylic, making a fade from light to more saturated blue near the torso. Dyeing the doll was a cool way to ensure that the joints are not pure white, so if the paint scratches, it's still going to look decent. The most time-consuming part was painting the epoxy crystals. To create a stylized and simple look, I'm highlighting all the edges with white and then adding dark and saturated colors to the flat surfaces. I know the paint will chip in a few places, but to prevent it, as much as I can, I'm applying a layer of matte acrylic varnish. I wanted huge and majestic antlers with LEDs, but we quickly realized that the neck won't hold it up, so I did delicate antlers with wire and hot glue to minimize the weight. I'm sculpting very simple eyelets and nothing more. I want him to look like a mysterious spirit. And we all know that when a design doesn't have a mouth or something is covering them, the character gains extra mystery points. I'm painting the head white and blue, but in my opinion, one-color designs are not as satisfying as 2 or 3 color palettes, so I'm adding a little bit of gold to the tip of the snout and later the tail, legs and crystals. Combining white and gold is the first thing when I think about an Asian spirit, you know, like angels or Greek mythology, and that's the vibe I want to create. I'm adding dark blue spiky pattern around the eye and on the forehead. Later, I added the same stripes to the neck, tail and hind legs because I like having the same pattern in different parts of the design. I believe that repetition makes the design more intentional. Now let's focus on making wings so this guy can fly. I'm cutting blade-like shapes from the same blue polymer clay that I used on the icicles, and I hope that after curing, they'll be transparent enough for the LEDs to lighten them up. I thought maybe it will work the same as our first idea, which was laser engraving, and will be better if the light hits the edge, so I carved a pocket for the LEDs. Well, no, it doesn't work like that, but the holes stayed.
I contemplated doing fancy 3D printed wings, but I am bringing it back to basics this time. I made a new circuit for the wings, actually one for each wing with one battery for each wing, and I'm using some thick cardboard and the clay pieces Alex made, plus some hot glue to assemble everything. This time the LEDs are just hastily glued on, and one of the circuit is a little bit fussy. But it works. It lights up most of the times, and most importantly, looks cool. These will get covered in foam feathers, which I cut on the Cricut, and some real feathers too.
Barb cut for me a lot of craft form feathers, but before I could glue them on the wings, I wanted to add a little bit of color to them. I chose a delicate gradient from light blue to a slightly darker tone, and I'm also adding a lot of details. It later turned out that I changed the color on the feathers twice. First time I switched the fade and made the tips darker, and the second time you'll see in a few minutes. Sometimes the idea is good, but it doesn't match with the rest of the design, and you have two choices: leave it as it is and stay unsatisfied, or sacrifice some extra time and come up with a different solution. So this is not the final look of the wings. I stringed the doll back into one, or rather, for now, two pieces, and I gave it to Barb for a final touch of science magic. Really, for me, all the LED stuff is magic.
I needed to add a switch for the neck and tail, and here's how that went. Spoiler, not great. This one's off for some reason. It was on before when I was testing it. And then the two ones in the front also lit up for a second. Did you see that? So these work sometimes, just not all the times. And I really can't realistically do anything about that anymore. Does the switch work? No, the switch does not work. God damn it. See? Sometimes only one works. I am stupid. So, the point of a switch is that it interrupts a circuit. And if you do it right, it works, basically. So what I did wrong was I was a total idiot and I forgot how things work. So this I will glue in here. Well, I hope you can see something because the rest can be stuck inside and it's not my problem anymore. Bye!
It turns out that I'm not a very good doctor and I have a very little knowledge about dragons' anatomy, and I broke one of the cables. The patient's dead. Barb fixed it and I glued the pieces back to be one full dragon. I also glued the first neck and tail balls because with the wires inside we had to use thinner elastic and it doesn't hold the poses as well as it should. The last check if the switch works, and I can cover the gap with epoxy sculpt. Something was missing on his legs, so I'm sculpting more rocks. The geometrical look can be done when the clay is almost cured but still soft enough to cut. When all the epoxy is cured, I can finally see him in one color. I chose to paint a patchy texture on his body for 3 reasons. A, because it's interesting for the eye. B, to look like running water. And C, to look like running water. No, C, to cover the imperfections from enlarging the holes in the neck and tail pieces. Here I realized that the wings don't match, and I tried to balance the look by adding a white belly. But I decided that I'm not satisfied with them and painted the feathers dark blue. I'm adding chalk pastels to change the color of real feathers and painted gold details on the craft form feathers. I like sparkly things, so to make him more shiny, I added a lot of gold to the crystals on his neck, tail and legs. He looks like the spirit of an icy cold spring in the mountains that has golden stones and sand in it. The neck is the most wobbly part, as the elastic inside is pretty thin, so to hold it a bit better, I added a gold wire around his horns and neck. And a detail that will fall off during the first photoshoot, a golden wire bracelets on the legs and the tail.
It is not quite the masterpiece I had envisioned, but it is mine, and it is finally done. The dragon's wings are a little wonky, and its neck and tail are held together by hope and good intentions, but it's still a representation of our imagination and our desire to create something beautiful. It's not going to win any awards, but it's a reminder that sometimes, even when we fail, we can still achieve something worth admiring.
If you ask me, this is how the third evolution of Dratini and Dragonair should look. Blue, long, and mysterious. And I think he's a dragon, ice, rock, and flying type. Is that too much?
We decided to name him Chilli because somebody said that when we did the other dragon. And when it's cold, you could say it's chilly. Also, AI names sucked, so this is what we have left.
It turns out we transformed both Dragetarr dolls into water creatures. One is a friendly guardian of the lake, and the other one is a mysterious creature from the mountain river.
Make sure to follow us on Instagram for some sneak peeks and subscribe for future videos. Have an enchanted 2023 and we'll see you next time. Bye! When all I do is for you, Kermie.